Hi everyone, this is Brian Hayes, and welcome to episode 14 of the Music Mind podcast. Today, my special guest is Gordon Rittmeister, a professional drummer based out of Sydney, Australia, with a wonderful career spanning more than 40 years. Gordon quite literally is the drummer for all seasons. He's performed and recorded with the cream of the crop across a wide variety of musical styles. Please enjoy my conversation with Gordon Rittmeister. Well, hi, Gordon, and welcome to the Music Mind podcast. It's a real thrill to have you here as my special guest for episode 14 in the series.
G'day, Brian. Thanks for having me, mate. It's a pleasure. Yeah.
You are, in fact, my very first drummer that I've interviewed so far. So you've got the honour of representing the drumming community there.
All right.
Our audience have just seen and heard you playing with a lot of energy there with the Steve Hunter Trio, just playing some jazz. Can you tell us a bit about that band, who the guys are and what it's like sitting in a small group like that?
Sure. Well, that's, that's my release, that gig. We do that once a month. Steve's a really great friend of mine. We've been playing together on and off for, best part of 30 something years, actually. I first started playing with Steve in about 1990, I think. I just got out of conservatorium. Steve's a virtuoso bass player, electric bass player, and Steve's it's interesting because that gig for me is, as I say, my release from playing kind of let's say commercial, for the most part, commercial music or music constrained by certain parameters. Whereas that gig is, really get to play however you feel at the time. But what I was going to say about Steve is that's pretty much what Steve does all the time. He's an artistic player, he's a creative player, and has stuck to that his whole career. He's pretty much just play. You don't call Steve if you want just a bass player. You call Steve to be Steve. So Steve,
wow,
Steve's
great. Yeah, what a way to live. To just live your dream and do that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And that's, and I always take my hat off to Steve. He's stuck to his, he hasn't sort of fallen off the trail from where he first started as a teenager and as a kid, enthusiastic about the music and into the music that he's into and stuck to his guns and played like that. And it's a beautiful thing. And so it's a great vehicle for me to get out and have a play. And we always hook up, Steve and I, and have a good time. And that's Matt McMahon on piano. Matt's a great jazz player. Matt's fantastic. I always say the great thing about Matt on that gig particularly is that he's prepared to cop whatever Steve and I throw at him.
You can tell that, you can just tell there's a lot of friendship amongst that group. When you're playing the drums in that super free environment, obviously there's still the structure of the the tune that's being played, even though it's improvised. Do you hear the drums? And I guess this is a generic question. Do you hear the drums as a melodic instrument or only as a percussive instrument? What are you hearing when you are just playing free there in that trio?
Gee, that's an interesting question. I mean, I guess I tend to hear the drums, rhythmically first. Like I think, I'm thinking rhythms. I'm thinking how things line up, how we're locking in rhythmically, time wise. And that's the case with any music, really. I suppose in that environment there are opportunities to play. I mean, you just saw one clip there of one piece, so and that happened to be a sort of brighter kind of swinging sort of a thing. Yes. But we do play sort of free-ish stuff, and where I'm playing like mallets on the tom-toms and those sorts of things and colors like that.
Yes.
But I suppose I'm still, for me, everything's grounded in the groove. Everything's grounded in the rhythm. Yes. And I think that's the, that's the common denominator regardless of what style I'm playing. Yeah, I'm always, I'm personally attracted to that and gravitate towards, how things feel,
Yeah. So I suppose if we just took it in a different direction and you were playing, say, for example, and we'll get to talk about this in more detail, but you're in the Don Burrows Quartet and they're playing Don't Get Around Much Anymore. And it comes to your solo. Are you saying that it's always for you, that you're not actually thinking ba-ba-da-ba-da-da, you're not actually thinking melodically, or is it a bit of both? Are you you've been following that tune, they've done their, so they look to you, okay, Gordon, go for it. Are you still in that melodic thing of the tune, or is it almost you're a separate from that tune when you're playing your solo?
No, in that instance, no, I am thinking melodies in that sense. I suppose I interpreted your original part of the question to be melodically phrasing on the drums. Melodically playing on the drums. Yes, I'm always thinking of the melodic rhythm, I would say. So, if I'm playing Don't Get Around Much, no, I'm phrasing around that rhythm. In fact, when I teach, one of the things introducing soloing to people is there's a fantastic video of Wynton Marsalis on YouTube where he's doing, it looks like he's doing a workshop. It looks like it's somewhere French speaking, so he has an interpreter. And it's Wynton and his saxophone player, and they just play Happy Birthday. Have you come across that?
I think I've seen it. Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So they just play Happy Birthday in 4/4 swinging.
Yes.
The saxophone player plays the melody, and Wynton just extemporizes on the melody. And essentially, that's what I teach as a foundation for playing solos, because particularly in the drum world, there are a lot of solos that are technically based. So as in, they might be rudimental hand patterns, linked together, or combinations with, coordination things with the cymbals and the various sort of patterns or combinations with the bass drum involved. And people get into basically copying these licks and stringing a bunch of them together, and it sort of sounds like, it can sound like sort of music by numbers. It can sound like going, I'm playing lick 1, 2, 3, 4, or one day I might play lick 1, 4, 3, 2, but it's lick, 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 lick. Whereas coming at it from and this is what I think differentiates jazz play, like this, and I'm making generalizations, but the jazz guys come at it from a melodic point of view, in as much as they're doing those patterns, and they're doing those on the drums. They're doing those combinations and incorporating the bass drum and so on, and coordination things and whatever, and rudiments. However, if you come at it where the impetus to do that is from the melody, then it tells a story that you know and you're staying true to the song. It tells a story. You can unfold it, and it's a much more musical way to approach it, in my opinion.
Oh,
So
I totally agree. Yeah, totally agree. And you to me, are a very melodic drummer, for the want of another word, because even the great Buddy Rich or something, you know, like 10 minutes into the West Side Story solo or something, well, I'm nodding off too, even though it's technically brilliant, but it can become almost an Olympic Games event, I think, on the drums at sometimes at the expense of music. And I'm not in any way knocking Buddy Rich, but it can, for a non-drummer, sort of become like, oh, you know, when will the Energizer Bunny wear himself out? It can become like that. But
I would say if I could do that,
I would. No, and I agree. And look,
but just to go back to your original question,
yes,
because I'd said, you know, I'm playing more rhythmically, but I would say, yeah, if interpreting it how I think you meant it, yeah, I am playing off melodies in that sense. I don't think I'm playing melodically. I'm not thinking melodically, but I'm thinking of the melodic rhythm, if you will. You know.
Yes. Yeah. Now we're going to, throughout the conversation, Gordon, throw up some photos. You've sent some amazing photos, wonderful memories. I'm going to put up a couple now of you as a very, very young guy. The first one we've got is you at home. I don't know, you look about 15 there. I don't know how old you were, just in the lounge room or something. How did your parents put up with a young drummer in their house? Was it a popular move or not?
Sometimes I really do not know. I don't know. You know, I mean, like, I used to get home from school and play from the time I got home till about 7 o'clock at night, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really don't know. We just had a regular, like a little house with a you know, thin, you know,
walls,
not a Caulfield door, and you know, you know, I would shut the door. That was my concession to them. But yeah, honestly, I don't know. You know.
So was it always the drums? What? Tell us about, how did music come into your life?
Well, I was into music. My sister, I had an older sister. She was 6 years older, and music was everywhere. It seemed to me like that, and I thought that was a normal upbringing. Like, you know, kids. You know, I was born in '68, grew up in the '70s when Countdown was a big thing for me.
Yeah,
Countdown. I used to watch all those shows, Sound Unlimited, you know, Donny Sutherland. So it was sort of pop music, I suppose, was the first thing that caught my attention. But the great thing about those shows, even though a lot of it was miming, but you saw people playing. You know, you saw the guys playing the drums and all that. So you know, and I gravitated to that, and it was just what everybody did. The music my sister got into, but being 6 years old, was like another sort of, generally another level up from the Countdown stuff in a way. Like she'd be listening to, you know, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Wings were big, Little River Band, all the great, you know, Supertramp, you know, Crime of the Century, and like all those 70s great records, Bob Dylan, and all of that stuff. So I was turned on by music, and just, it was, you know, a big part of what life was for everybody. My folks weren't really into music, although my mother always said that my dad used to listen to classical music, but by the time I was a certain age, my sister had sort of taken over the stereo, and so it was, you know.
Yeah. And what about the drums though? Was it always the drums? Was that your first instrument, and you've stuck with it, obviously?
Yeah. Basically, I mean, I first saw, the first live drummer I saw was a guy called Paul Smith, who was at my primary school. He was, I think, a year below my sister, so he would have been 5 years ahead of me, and I was just in, you know, first or second class at school, and he was in year 6, and they had a variety concert, and this guy came out playing the drums, and it was like, you know, he played traditional grip, and it was, you know, really exciting for me. I'd never seen a drummer in the flesh, and that was, you know, that I recalled anyway, and that was, you know, he just did a drum solo, and, you know,
gotcha.
Yeah, absolutely, and so I was into that, but so yeah, it was always the drums, but I didn't make any moves at that point towards playing, other than just you know, listening and being interested. But it wasn't until I got to high school in year 7 where they offered drum lessons,
Okay.
or individual instrument lessons, and
Yeah.
I just signed up. And in fact, sorry, they weren't individual at first; they were class lessons.
Yes.
Drumming class.
Yes.
It didn't take long before they became individual lessons.
So you would have been what age at that point when you first 13? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously you got your first kit around that time at home. Your parents got you a kit.
A couple of years later.
Okay.
Yeah, they had a drum kit at school which I used to play on, and then it's probably, I imagine it would have been the next year I got a drum kit. And it was an old a little Max one when we drove out to St Mary's and
okay.
Picked up this kit. Yeah.
Picked that. Yeah. Now look, one of the photos that I've had up while we're talking there is you singing and playing, which of course it was all the thing in the garage bands. Now, you've had the chance in your career to back some amazing singers, and we're actually gonna watch you performing with Marsha Hines next. And I mean, wow, there's a singer. Did you ditch the vocals? Your vocal career was short-lived, was it, in just some of the school bands, or?
Yeah, that if it's the photo I'm thinking of, that was in my high school rock band.
Okay, yeah,
and yeah, we I mean, I used to sing like some of the lead vocals and things. It's a funny thing. Like I'm often when compared to the real singers I play with.
Yes,
I feel like it's not a serious thing.
No.
But then I mean I and certainly singing backing vocals, like I'm terrible at unless I have to really know the part. I'm not, otherwise I'll just jump on the melody and like I'm not, but I mean, one of the bands I play with is Glenn Shorrock's band, and we do a lot of little river band stuff as you'd imagine. And we've got John Bettison on guitar and Emil Nelson on bass, and they both do the backing vocals, and they sound fantastic. They're both great singers in their own right, and occasionally when they've been away,
you've stepped up to the plate.
Well, no, there was one time. When it was offered to me to step up to the plate. No, I refused. I wasn't going to, not in that company.
Not in that way. Yeah. Now, this clip with Marsha Hines on Rock Me. This is that in front of Parliament House? Where is it? It's an enormous gig somewhere.
Yeah, it is. That was at an Australia Day gig. For many years, I've done Australia Day gigs with John Foreman.
Yes.
And probably for the last 10 or 12, they've been at the Opera House. On the Opera House steps, we do this gig on the forecourt, and it's a great, it's become a great thing. Well, it always was a great thing, but it's and maybe they'll change the date of Australia Day, and move the gig. But at this point, that's where it is. But initially, I think for the first 2 or 3 years of doing those gigs with John, we did them at Parliament House.
So for our international audience, this is in Canberra and in front. I think that's the new Parliament House too, isn't it? Not the old one. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Let's have a look and a listen. This is a fantastic, just a really good performance. Marsha's just, I always marvel how a great singer Marsha seems to be able to find the camera from 100 meters back and just stare the camera down and takes her time with the story she's telling. She just is wonderful how she'll just please, she takes forever to say some of those words. Let's have a listen to Marsha Hines, Gordon on drums, fantastic band, and Rock Me.
I said I wouldn't, I said wouldn't cry. I said I wouldn't, I said I said I wouldn't, I said I know you're leaving me behind, and I'm seeing you, darling, for the very last time. Show a little tenderness before you go. Please let me feel your embrace once more. Take me in your arms, rock me a little while. Rock me a little while.
Okay, Gordon, so that's quite a large band. You're in the open air. I'm imagining that you're relying very heavily on the sound in your monitors there to be able to keep that band together. My very first question is counting in a song like that. That's 9 times out of 10, that's up to the drummer. Are you using clicks or a metronome to get that tempo right, or is it just a feel there?
I can't remember specifically on that in that instance,
No.
but I would imagine. So that's working with John Foreman. In that instance, and John always does everything top notch. John, I always say of John, he gives you your best chance to sound good. And he knows in with the guys that he picks, the people that he picks, that in giving them their best chance to sound good, the whole thing will sound good. Because you pick good guys who understand what everybody's role is and who don't step on each other and all that. But that's all not the question you asked. But so that in his instance, in the instance of John, for I'd say 90% of the stuff I've done with John over the years, he's running a click track.
Right. Okay.
And that might be just to start the song.
Yes.
But we've all got in-ear monitors, and he's also got talk back to us. So and with John, if he says it's going to be 2, 3, 4, it's going to be 2, 3, 4. If he says it's going to be 1, 2, 1, 2, he gives you what he says it is. There's no, so you're able to relax in the knowledge that everybody's taking care of their business.
Yes.
Everyone's taking care of their business, and so knowing that, like with John, if, for instance, on those live things, there'll be something happening on the center stage, and John will be talking to us saying, just once before, he'll say, here's a tempo reminder. He'll run the click a little bit, and he'll switch it off, and he'll say, and I'll give you 2, 3, 4, and then it comes time they throw to the song, and he'll go 2, 3, 4, and you're away.
Right.
So yeah, you get every chance to start relaxed and make it feel like something.
Well, that's great. That's a really good insight there, Gordon, because in the audience you watch that, and it's something I've often marveled at, particularly in a larger band and in an open air environment where your sound's just going straight up to the moon. There's no really acoustic collaboration there. So I suppose a further question: how much control do you have over the mix in your monitors that you're hearing? Do you have a fair bit of control, or are you just giving hello, here's a mix, there it is?
It depends on the situation. In most of the TV things I do and I've done, you're getting an Avium mix, which is a personal mixer. So the new ones have 32 channels of mix, and they'll send you. They'll send you a grouping of the drums. They might, like if you're really lucky, they might send you a kick drum separate, so you can get a bit more, like the drummer who generally wants a bit more kick, can bring up the kick himself, and so on. So you've got, you'll have each of the instruments individual, so you can dial in as much or as little as you need. I'll tend to dial in the things that are necessary, and if it's all sounding good, then I'll dial in the things that are fun, as in like backing vocals, or like things that don't affect me time wise, but that I want to hear to enjoy the performance more. So to answer your question, in most of those big TV type things, we have good control. You have your own control, and it's good. It's really good. Yeah. But that varies. Sometimes there's budgets aren't as good, and then you're relying on a monitor guy, and you're hoping that they're good and they're responsive and all of that. And that can be frustrating. But once you've got used to doing your own,
obviously it takes time to set up that mix that you want. Is that something you do in rehearsal? You obviously need some time. Yeah. So you got time to get that how you want it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And sometimes that the time is pressed, like you're pressed with that. But look, worst case, if I can hear sort of the click track and the talk back, the MD's talk back. So in that case, I can hear John talking to me. Yes. The bass and the singer. then that's sort of the absolute minimum you're going to want. But yeah, outdoors is tricky, and you can muddy the waters, like with
with
well,
look,
stuff.
and this is a good segue into you've got a wonderful little clip, sort of a drummer cam clip, where you're letting the viewers into your headphones, and it's on I think it's labeled the Schuyler Sisters, but you're actually drumming to a very obvious metronome click track. I suppose I just got one more question. In that environment, you're backing Marshall Hines there. You've got the click to start with. Is it annoying to have the click throughout, or do you have the option to not have the click throughout once you start, so that you are organically not having Rodney the robot telling you where the 4 beats are? Or do you prefer to have that click constantly throughout the song?
Well, okay. To answer the question in parts, it's not annoying. I love having a click because it takes the guesswork out, and any sort of discrepancy, any sort of notion from someone it's too fast or it's too slow. It's like, that's where it was,
That's right.
So
okay, yeah.
That's that part of it I enjoy, but but certainly if the click starts and it's going to continue, I can't then turn mine down, because I'll get out of time with it, and so
okay.
I need it to go. But often, as I mentioned, John would just get a start tempo and run it for the first verse and maybe chorus, and then drop it out and let the thing be organic after that. And I think a part, like the main part of that, is to prevent the adrenaline, the possibility of adrenaline kicking in and counting the thing too fast, which happens a lot, or too slow, or for whatever, whatever. But so just getting the tempo to at least start right, and then feeling it from there is the thinking. But I'm happy to play with the click all the way. And sometimes when there's sequence parts on things, you have to, of course.
Yes.
But I know when we used to do Australian Idol, it was, for the most part, we'd have clicks all the way, because the things had to come in at a certain time, exactly, a certain like to the second sort of thing. So you couldn't, it couldn't be over, or they'd see that as unfair between the different singers.
How long has clicks been part of your professional playing?
Well, I started in the 80s. I started in 1981. I started playing, and clicks were certainly around in studios and stuff, but as a beginner in starting in the suburbs of Ryde, I remember my mum bought me a metronome, one of those,
the old wind-ups,
and it used to get, it'd be like click,
click,
click, click.
Exactly.
So you're training yourself
erratically
to play.
Yes.
Right. But I did get a drum machine fairly, I had that at when I was living at Mum's place. So, so that was, I used to use that all the time. I used to program things in it. I used to do things like programming 8 bars of time and then 8 bars of silence, and loop that, and then and then play through and try to solo or play time or solo through the 8 bars of silence and stay on it.
Great. Well, tell us a bit about the Schuyler Sisters. What's going on here in that clip? Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, so that's from Hamilton, the musical,
right?
And that is part of a full video, which I put together to give to the Depths, someone who was going to fill in with Glenn Wilson filled in on that show, and that was to give him the basically what was going on, and how to go about the show, because doing a show like that, there's the drumming itself, which has to be a certain standard, of course, but it's the routine, and that show in particular never lets up. It was there's a lot to do, because just even where to turn pages, because if you don't turn the page at the right time, and you let it go, you're looking at a time where both hands are occupied and you cannot get to it.
The page.
So and there's electronic drums integrated. I don't know if you can see it on that, but there's on that kit, and it's a very specific drum kit that the original Broadway production put together. Like there are 5 different snare drums, and they're all
wow.
have uses. Like, there's a regular snare in the normal position, then you've got a high pitched piccolo, a little firecracker snare, a big fat sort of 80s Barry White kind of snare, and a Civil War marching drum, and they've all got these specific purposes. And I'd color coded those in the charts, so I knew which
one
what I'm looking at.
Wow.
And there was electronic stuff as well. So like triggering certain electronic drum sounds, like a hip hoppy type sounds, and same with the page turns. You'd have to, for instance, change the patch on the change which set of sounds you're using. Could be like 2 or 3 songs before you need it, but if you don't,
you haven't got time to do it.
You haven't got time to do it later. So
wow.
So that video was made for the purpose of kind of instructing the depth drummer to know the routine.
Okay, let's have a quick look at it. We just got a little bit here, but it'll give the audience, I guess, an idea of how complex you've just described. A very complex sort of operation there that's got to be timed with military.
Can I just say,
absolutely.
You'll notice on this too, there are times where the click track comes in and out, and the musical director is Laura Topoki. She's counting the band in at certain points, and then the click track just starts. There's no she's got it'll be like 3, 4 click, and the click has to hit. The click's controlled by the percussionist, and it's a real intricate operation, as you say.
Yeah. Let's have a look. We'll just have a look at a little bit of it, but people will get an idea of what a complex operation that is.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and there's nothing rich folks love more than going downtown and slumming it with the poor. They pull up in the carriages and gawk at the students in the common just to watch them talk. Take Philip Schuyler, the man is loaded. But little does he know that his daughters, Peggy, Angelica, Eliza, sneak into the city just to watch all the guys at work.
Okay, Gordon, Australian Idol, and we'll throw up a couple of good photos of your drum kit on the Australian Idol set there. So is this around, 2005, 6 or 7, around that mid-2000s, is it?
It was 2003, I think, was the first, and ran the first series, season, or first lot of it ran from 2003 to 2009.
Wow.
7 years, yeah.
And were you the drummer across the whole period?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did that gig come about, I guess? How does one become the drummer on a high profile show that has a enduring sort of time span?
Well, I'd gone to the conservatorium after I left school and did the jazz course there, and at the same time I was there, John Foreman was in the high school, the conservatorium high school, and we became friends there, and we did a lot of playing. In fact, I played on his HSC at the time.
Wow! Yeah,
which he still chastises me for dining out on, but I played on that, and but we did a lot of gigs at the time with Darren Percival, who was a singer, is a singer, and we used to work around town and a lot, just playing gigs, and John used to get trio gigs, and I did a lot of work with John in the early 90s.
Mm.
He then moved to Melbourne to do the Bert Newton show, the morning show with Bert Newton.
Yes, yeah.
And then when he got offered the gig as MD for Australian Idol when it was coming, when it first started, and he rang me and said, "Are you interested?" And also he was sort of out of touch with who was around in Sydney, and said, "Can you recommend players and stuff?" So that's how that came about.
So it really is, and it's a bit like your good friend Ralph Pyle, who was my guest in episode 13, and Ralph talked at length about it. It's really those personal connections that often will get you in the door. It's not so much, your checklist of who you've played with or something. It's. Would you say it is largely who you know, just your reputation from who you know, or what is it? A bit of both, is it? Or
yeah, I mean, you have to come up. You have to be able to come up with the goods, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, you've got to meet people. Like one of the things that is often said about the Conservatorium, the jazz course in Sydney, is that, no one's ever actually used the bit of paper, the qualification to say I'm capable of doing your gig. Here it is.
Yes.
But it's the meeting people and the you're suddenly in the scene, because when I was at the con, the teachers were the players around town, and the students were the young people coming up.
Yes.
And I mean, that's how it happened for me. I got into bands of a couple of the teachers and so on, and
yes.
And started working, and then that led to other things, and that's
and the reputation grows. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just on the kit, and you mentioned just before in the Hamilton music thing, a very specific kit. I notice in the photos and the videos, is it true that you've largely played Yamaha across?
Yeah.
Are you a Yamaha artist, or you just you are a Yamaha? Yeah. What does that mean in real terms? Because a lot of musicians will see, Steve Gadd's playing whatever. What does it actually mean? Do you get assistance from Yamaha, or is it just a moniker there to say that you're a Yamaha man?
Well, okay. So in the drum world, endorsements have always been a kind of a badge of honor or something like there's there's definitely a sort of perceived prestige or something in having an endorsement or having,
Yes.
But for me, I remember the very first time I played a Yamaha kit. I was a kid coming up, and my kit my first professional kit that I bought was a Tama.
Yes.
And because I liked Simon Phillips, I loved Simon Phillips, and he played Tama. And so I bought this kit, and I thought it was a great kit. And I remember I was down at Sound Level Studios, which was a rehearsal studio in Sydney, and they used to have Yamaha kits as their house kits in there. And I couldn't take my drums to the rehearsal, so we used one of the house kits. And I remember hitting this Yamaha drum, and I remember this. I couldn't believe how good it sounded and how stable it was.
Yes.
And I was an instant
Yamaha
convert.
man.
So I my first few Yamaha kits I bought, and then when I started touring with Margaret Ehrlich, I got an endorsement from Yamaha.
Okay.
I became a Yamaha artist. That was 1992. And so, but I can honestly say, I play the drums because I like the drums.
You love the drums.
Yeah. And over the years, there's been various, degrees of assistance they've given in terms of support. But the main thing these days is when I'm traveling within the country, and actually and overseas too, but most of my traveling in the last few years, sort of COVID years, and a little bit before, has been locally,
Yes.
like as in interstate. The Yamaha will provide a drum kit in the capital cities wherever I go.
Look, that was one of my questions, because I know you've just came back from Perth, and we'll throw up a photo here, great photo of you with Lisa Simone, who's the daughter of the famous Nina Simone. But my first mind is, does Gordon have to load up his drum kit, put it under, like, so the answer there is, do you, and you have the ability to nominate to some extent the type of kit you want, not just, hello, here's a kit. Yamaha will let you, have pretty much what you've got at home.
Yeah, if you want to know how it works, I mean, like the Yamaha. So there are hire companies in every capital and around, And Yamaha has put kits for their endorsers in with each of those hire companies around the country.
Okay.
And so, those kits will be extensive. So they might have a variety of bass drum sizes, a variety of tom-tom sizes, and so on.
Yep.
A variety of snares, and then plenty of hardware and all of that.
Yeah.
So basically, you specify your specs and you spec your specs. It goes with you don't always get 100% what you want. I like the shallower toms, and occasionally they they're out of those, so they have the bigger toms, deeper toms. But it's
So do you literally walk on the plane with a set of drumsticks, or what do you take with you? What about cymbals and that?
Yeah, I'll take my cymbals.
Take your cymbals,
because cymbals are pretty personal. So I take my cymbals and sticks, of course, but look, I used to take snare drums, but less and less so. It's just harder to travel with stuff these days.
Yes.
And bass drum pedals was the other thing. But if I get a stock standard Yamaha pedal, I can adjust it within a couple of minutes to where I want.
And you're comfortable. So you're comfortable traveling around Australia without the hassle, because that's really that's interesting. Now, with Australian Idol, I want to play a clip here. The singer went under the name of Stan, and it's a song called Single Ladies, which is a big band track. And there's a great little cameo appearance by James Morrison. He gets to play a couple of bars in there. And there's also a wonderful moment where Harry Connick Jr., who was one of the judges, makes a point of giving you some high praise for what you were doing in this particular song. So, well, how much input do the musicians have in the rehearsal period to the backing of those singers? Say, particularly in this case of Single Ladies, that track. What's the background on that?
It differed from time to time, but that was part of the big band shows. They'd have a big band show maybe once a year or every couple of years on Idol, and I used to love the big band show because it was a time. It was an occasion when we really got to interpret the songs and do something different with them that was original. Rather than a lot of the time. It would depend on the artist, but I'd say sort of with the regular shows, about 70% of the time we'd be just recreating the original track and trying to cop that. With certain artists, like for instance, Guy Sebastian would sort of like to reinterpret things, and so you'd have a change. You'd have a different sort of approach. But with the big band, everything was like an interpretation. So that arrangement that you're talking about is by Ross Irwin, who's great trumpet player and piano player from Melbourne. Ross is a great cat and an incredible musician. He actually recently did all the arrangements for Kate Sobrano's My Life as a Symphony. So Kate Sobrano with the symphony orchestra.
Wow.
And he's just a fantastic musician and arranger and guy, like fantastic, extraordinary. But anyway, that arrangement is his. And it's funny because it started out as a sort of swing type thing.
Yes.
And we rehearsed, I think we rehearsed sort of prior, like we used to rehearse the day before or something. And so during the rehearsals, I'd kind of morphed it into a bit of a New Orleans kind of a groove. And not with any not with any sort of cunning plan, knowing that Harry Connick was from New Orleans. But no, it was just because it sort of felt right for that song, and it sort of worked. So rather and in fact, Harry spoke to me later and said, he said, that changed a lot from the first time he'd heard it in the rehearsal. So, but it was, it started out as a swing sort of thing.
Yes.
And then we got into that that sort of second line kind of groove.
It's great. Let's have a listen to it now. Look and a listen. It's a really good vibe in the band, and the drums play a really integral role in that. Single Ladies, here we go.
All the single ladies, all the single ladies, all the single ladies, now put your hands up. Up in the club, we just broke up. I'm doing my own little thing. Decided to dip, and now you wanna trip, cause another sister noticed me. She up on me, I'm up on her, don't pay her any attention. To dry my tears, 3 good years, she can't be mad at me. If you like it, then you should've put a ring on it. If you like it, then you should've put a ring on it. Don't be mad what you see that she wants. If you like it, then you should've put a ring. Whoa, oh, oh, whoa, oh, 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 whoa, oh, oh, come on. Don't treat me to the things of the world. I'm not that kind of guy. Your love is what I prefer. What I deserve is a girl that makes me and it takes me and delivers me to a destiny, to infinity and beyond. Put me into your world. And I'm the one you want. 'Cause if you don't, you'll be alone. Like a ghost, I'll be gone. Put your hands up. Oh, 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 oh. If you like it, then you should've put a ring on it. Hey, don't matter what you see that she wanted. If you like it, then you should've put a ring on it. Whoa, oh, oh.
When I heard that you were gonna be doing a Beyonce song, I was like, Beyonce what? But you came out and threw down, that was like a New Orleans vibe, man. Props to that drummer, man. That's a Hey Pocky Way New Orleans beat back there, man. Man, I thought that was awesome, bro. I like that version better than the original version, bro.
Who did you actually study with at the con? Who was your primary teachers or teacher?
Well, the drum teacher was David Jones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dave. Yeah. So, and that
Yeah.
was a big part of the motivation for me wanting to go to the con.
Yes.
Because I would say, as I mentioned before, I grew up on Countdown, and so I'd grown up in a sort of pop rock backbeat sort of a world.
Yes. Yeah.
And the jazz, the whole jazz thing. I mean, it was the drums that led me to jazz.
Okay.
Not the other way around. I didn't start out as a jazz enthusiast who took up the drums because they saw like Max Roach or somebody like that. But so I and I think that was sort of fairly normal for someone like me, from Sydney and growing up in that environment. But so it, getting to like jazz and understand jazz and like jazz was a process for me. It wasn't. I didn't automatically gravitate to the sound of jazz. It didn't appeal.
Yeah.
But so, but I got to the con and I studied there with. Well, Don was the head of the course. George was there, and George was my arranging teacher and harmony teacher.
Yes.
Roger Frampton was there.
And
Roger was, he was fantastic at opening people's minds. Like really getting them to think outside the box. He's actually later became my father-in-law, so I married Roger's daughter. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Mike Knock was there at the time,
Yes.
and Mike was fantastic. I always sort of joke that I learned a lot despite Mike's teaching, because I,
Yeah.
I love Mike could be confusing as a teacher. Let's just say that.
Okay.
But he, Mike
Mm.
was very big on the groove, very big on the feel of things, and
Mm.
I got a lot from Mike. There were Judy Bailey, John Nemi. There were a lot of good teachers there, but yeah, David Jones was the drum teacher, and that was my, as I say, my primary motivation for wanting to pursue the jazz course. But I got to, as I said, that I suppose the big thing there was meeting a lot of people, and I was in the same year as I was in was Cameron Undy, who plays the bass, and he owns had a jazz club here, and I still play with Cameron from time to time.
Yep.
The Lisa and Nikki Perrott sisters, Adrian Mears, who trombone player, is living in Germany. Andrew Dickerson was the other drummer in the year I was in, so we were like
competitors.
Yeah.
So were you required, because I think Ralph mentioned that you were required to take on a second instrument at the con. Was that what did you have to take on, or what did you take on as the second study?
Well, I took on piano, and
Okay.
my friends will all joke that I'm pretty good at all the things you are up to the bridge.
Okay. Yeah.
But I, and I wish I'd taken it more seriously. I was at the time, I was very much focused on the drums and wanting to be, a virtuosic sort of a drummer, and pursuing that. But I would love to know, be better at harmony and all of that stuff. I can converse in musical terms with people, but
drums is the thing. So how did a kid, I suppose you were what, 18, 19, 20? What age were you when you went into the con?
Yeah, probably. Well, I took a year off after school, so I'd say I would have been 19.
Okay.
19.
How does a 19-year-old kid go from, enrolling in the con to becoming a member of the Don Burrows Quartet at a time when Don Burrows was undeniably the biggest name in jazz and an absolute icon in jazz? How did you sneak that gig? Because just looking at the photos, and we've thrown a few up here, there's a photo of you in Hong Kong with Don George and Ed Gaston on bass, and there's a photo of you in New Zealand with Don George and Craig Scott on bass. Now, were you aware at the time of the legendary status of those guys, or did it just seem like you're on tour with your dad and a couple of uncles? What did it? What was your perception of the situation when you got the chance to be in that group?
Yes. To answer your question, I knew who they were. I knew the impact that they'd had. Well, the way it came about was that David Jones was Don's drummer.
Yes, and
David was doing less and less. David, by choice, was wanting to travel less and do less sort of stuff. So when David left the band. And towards the end, I used to fill in for David in Don's band. The first one I did was at the Supper Club, the Don Burrows Supper Club.
Yeah.
And it was, it was me, and it was Craig Scott, Don, George Goller, and Julian Lee. It was a quintet.
Oh, great.
So that's hundreds of years of experience, heavyweight experience there.
Absolutely.
And there's little me.
tapping away quietly.
But it was funny because I was definitely open-minded and into understanding the history of jazz at that point, and understanding, and what better place to do it than with those guys who really, really lived it. Yeah. But I was also into, I was into other contemporary music and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And in a way, and Don liked that. He liked that I brought a sort of a kind of fresh approach, I guess. It wasn't like getting one of his contemporaries or one of his age,
Yeah.
And Don was always quite forward thinking and open to new stuff, despite what some people will have you believe,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
but so
And just on that, Gordon, I'll share an experience there to totally agree with you. My first time I ever saw Don Burrows was at a workshop at the Queensland Con, and there's Don with his clarinet, his pickup, his octave divider, and his wah-wah pedal. And the first thing I heard Don play was just like, wow. I'm expecting Benny Goodman playing there. And Don was just up it in an incredibly, just him and George, in an incredibly contemporary thing. I walked away from that thinking, wow, it just opened my mind.
Yeah. Right.
Because,
what year was that? When
that would have been, look, that would have been in the 1970s, probably 1974, 75, mid 70s.
Well, that's pretty forward thinking at that time, isn't it?
Mate, I've to this day I've never heard anyone play with it wasn't like an old man trying to be cool. He was just, Randy Brecker on fire, with the electronics, but with the sound of the clarinet. And I always thought, wow, like it just confirms what you were saying, that he would have welcomed your younger, fresh ideas rather than just, I'll get Alan Turnbull to play with me, as great as Alan Turnbull was, just bringing in that other thing. So what's your memories of being introduced to Don's audience and all of that? When you look back there, if you had your life over again, would you probably soak up more from it, or with the youth? Because those guys were 35 years older than you, or 30 years older than you.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think you really soaked it up, or was it just all a little bit of a journey?
No, I think I got a lot out of it. I mean, those guys tell me life stuff, like that was, Don was right into getting in my ear about getting into property and like all that sort of stuff. Like, and
yes,
they were saying, like, don't get married too young, like that,
well, they'd been there and done that. Yeah,
that's right.
And I think Don used to. I remember reading somewhere where his party trick was he'd go and buy an old house, do it up, and then sell it. So he's playing jazz at the Wentworth, Supper Club or something. Next minute he's out, fixing up the fence and painting.
Oh yeah, I got some great stories of Don's, financial. I won't.
No. But I suppose, and I'll just throw up a photo, a final photo there where it's a beautiful photo where, Don's, well in his 60s, maybe his early 70s. Don's playing the clarinet sitting down. James has got the trombone smiling at Don, and right in the middle of those two guys is you on the drums. It's a beautiful photo because you've sort of got, the iconic legend of Australian jazz and his most famous apprentice, James Morrison, over there. And for you to be respected enough to be in there, mate, you should take an enormous amount of confidence out of that. You must be so proud, because they could have got anyone to play the drums, but you're in there playing. What's your memories of playing with both James and Don when they did a lot of stuff together? I think I saw you somewhere in your travels backing those two guys. I remember, I didn't know who you were, but I remember I thought drums was great. Just what was needed. Was needed. What's your memory of those two guys? Because they're, you've had a lot of experience with both Don and James, who imagine you sort of grew up with James, did you? Or what's your relationship with James Morrison?
No, well, I got into, no, I didn't. As I said, like I was sort of in the rock world, thing as a kid. But James was I didn't sort of know about James till later high school, I suppose. But I wasn't like, whereas Ralph and James were contemporaries. They were mates. But I didn't grow up knowing James, I met James through. Actually, I can't even remember where I first met James, but it would have been probably playing with Don. But look, just before I do go into that, like when you said things about Don, I say that about learning about the property and life stuff. But one of the great lessons I got from Don was about time. Don had fantastic time
Oh.
on the saxophone, on the horns, you know.
Yeah.
And I used to say that you know, like Don would take a few choruses of the blues just solo out the front, and you could, I could visualize the rhythms he was playing as he was playing. It was like a chart unfolding before
Yes.
you, like, you know, if it was 16th notes, it would be
Yes.
16th notes. If it was an eighth note
Yeah.
triplet, it would be an eighth note triplet,
Yeah.
and all with a groovy pulse and steady and even,
Yes.
and you know. And in fact, I do have a funny story.
Yeah.
When Don was, you know, he had the dementia and was in the nursing home, and I went and visited him one day, and you know, I basically told him this story, and I said, you know, when I first played with him, I'd never encountered time like that on a saxophone player, you know, like a horn player playing with time like that. And I said, and so when I first played with him, I thought, oh, well, that must be the standard. That must be what
happens.
Yeah, what good professional,
Yeah.
you know, time playing is on the horn.
Uh,
And I said to him, but you know, having had 30 or whatever years experience myself, I haven't actually come across anyone with time as good as that, you know. And Don said, oh, that's great, mate. I said, thanks, mate. That's lovely. He said, because he said, you know, for me, it was always about the groove. You know, we'd always go to the dance band that had the best feel, and you know, and it was all about the time and the feel, you know. And he went on a bit, and then I said, oh, well, that's lovely. I'm glad I got to say that to you, you know, because I was a little bit emotionally, and I said, I'm glad I got to say that to you. And he said, what's that, mate?
Oh,
So
yes.
I went around again. And I told him
Had
the story
another
again.
go. Yes. Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful that you got the chance, even if it didn't stay in there too long. You got the chance to say that to him.
Yeah.
You know,
No, it was great. It was great.
I
I don't know if he was being cheeky and
he
just
could
wanting
have
to hear
been.
it again too.
He could have been too. I've got a. Sorry.
Oh well, I didn't sort of say much about James, then, but yeah. So you know, but when, like, I mean, what can you say about James? Like, those two guys together were well, James on his own, Don on his own, are amazing. But together, it's, you know, there's a real connection. And you know, I will say, I think it's rhythmic. The connection is rhythmic, and I think that's what, you know, as we said earlier, that's the thing I gravitate to. And you know, this is a bit of a long story, but James would run the Generations in Jazz, in Mount Gambier, and I was privy to the adjudication session when they were judging the players coming up. We used to play in the trio, backing the individual instrumentalists who were the finalists in the competition.
Yes.
And we'd go back, and I was privy to the adjudication, and what they were saying was that there was an instance where there was a piano player who was really quite advanced harmonically, but not as groovy. And there was another guy who was, I might have been a saxophone player, who was really groovy but not as advanced harmonically. And it sort of, it basically, everyone had to kind of put their flag in the ground, saying which they really valued more, you know.
Yes.
And it was interesting that James, with all his harmonic knowledge and you know, incredible ability, in the end, he's all about the groove, you know. He's all about the time and the swing and how it feels. And so's Don. It's you know, and it's a much more organic, emotional thing than you might than you think, you know. And I think that's what I'm into. Like, so
I guess that's how you really connected with those guys beyond anything else, because what I remember when you were playing with either Don or James, it wasn't about the flash and the flare. You just kept great time and in essence kept out of their road, which is a hard thing to do. I think, I don't play the drums, but I think if you have got a fair bit of technique, and I'll just finish this section on a little, I heard a great podcast with David Jones, and he was talking about playing with Don Burrows. And he said Don had a wonderful way of getting his message through without, like stamping him into the ground. So one night, he'd been playing with Don about 4 nights, and Don just come up to him and said, David, the samba's really a story of love. Walked away. And David's thinking, he'd been throwing David's sitting there, David's technique. So Don's playing one of his beautiful little flute sambas, and David's just hitting everything but the kitchen sink. And Don's little way, and he said, he said, I felt like digging a hole and just getting in it, because Don has quietly said to him, mate, it'd be good if you backed off a little bit in that. And remember, and what a wonderful moment that he really praised Don, that Don could have slammed him and said, mate, pull your head in. But that's the way he just sort of said, hey, maybe less is more. So what a wonderful story there.
Wow.
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 Mate, I want to change gear a little bit. You've got some great clips, and I'll let you tell me who the percussionist is and the bass player, but just it was labelled AM Project. Just use 3 guys doing some amazing stuff together as a trio. Who great percussion player, great bass player. Who are those guys? What's the story behind that group?
Well, that's actually Adam Manning is the percussionist, and that was his project. And there's not a lot of story. He just contacted me and said he wants to do something, and we came down and did that. That's in my studio here. That's done here.
Okay, who's on bass? Great bass player.
It's Jono. And I don't know Jono's last name.
Jono. Okay, well, Jono, thumbs up, Jono, because it's.
I just ran into Jono in Cairns the other week. So, but yeah.
Well, let's have a look at this, because this is great. Well, just a short clip here. Really good spirit amongst the players, a lot of energy, but it's also a moment where you start off very powerfully on the drums, but then the whole emotion calms down to almost to a whisper. Let's have a little bit of a look at from the AM Project. So, Gordon, I've got up on the screen a beautiful photo of you behind a drum kit in Soweto, and you're surrounded by some beautiful young faces there. What's the story behind that?
Oh, that was just this beautiful moment. I went to Soweto. I went to South Africa with Ian Cooper, a violin player, and the band was Ian Date and Natalie Morrison on bass, and we were doing a thing for the Australian government was promoting kind of trade or something, and the companies opening up, and we did a bunch of gigs while we were there, and one of the things we went to Soweto and we played and did a sort of masterclass type thing, like a workshop type thing, and it was great because the kids were there watching, and someone said, I think I said, can you play a beat? And so I just played a groove, and they all got up and started dancing and stood around, and they all came around. It was just this moment, and Natalie caught it on camera. It's
beautiful, mate. It's just a real, to me, it's the power of music. You can just see the excitement on those faces. Okay, let's move forward to the Opera House. And this is a moment where Lionel Richie surprises everyone. I don't know about the band. Did he surprise you guys, or did you sort of know on the quiet he'd be coming out?
We knew because we'd rehearsed with him. So to set it up, this was the Australian Idol Grand Final one year, and the finalists were they were singing, and I think they were told that Marsha would be coming out, because Marsha was one of the judges on Australian Idol. Yes. They were told Marsha would come out and sing the bridge,
Okay.
So, but so we rehearsed. So Lionel had been in New Zealand. He wasn't even in Australia, and they snuck him in to the country for the day.
Okay.
He came in. I think he was coming to Australia in a month or so, but he wasn't you know.
No, no.
So he came across, and they snuck him in. We did rehearse his bit,
Okay.
and then, you know, and it was all very, you know, sworn to
Hush, hush.
secrecy and
Yeah,
the whole thing, and
that's right. Yeah.
because nobody knew it, and you even see the judges, nobody knew, and it was a really great moment because, because of the surprise. That it was a fantastic thing. Yeah.
And again, really, the band's very good. The drums is integral in this. Let's have a look and a listen to Lionel Richie All Night Long at the Sydney Opera House. Gordon, I've got a photo up there on the screen now of you with Louis Bellson. Now that's one of the big names in drums. I guess growing up with an interest in big band and jazz, you know, the names of Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, but Louis Bellson was there too as a famous sort of big band drummer. What's the story behind that? How did you get to be so close to one of the legends of the drums there?
Well, again, that was touring with Don Burrows, and we were in New Zealand. And we had that we were on the road, and we ended up part of the tour was there was another tour going on which we sort of joined, and it was a road tour. So we all traveled on a bus, and it was Anita O'Day, and she had her band with her, and Louis Bellson with the Roger Fox Big Band.
Wow, yeah,
and so, you know, we did a number of nights with them, and it was just amazing to see Louis with the big band, you know, as you can imagine. Just that, you know, you talk about playing what's required, but in an understated and yet forceful way, like dictating exactly what's going on. And I just, by the way, Craig Walters, a well-known Sydney saxophone player, said of playing with Louis, when he got to play with Louis, he said, I expected him to be this old guy with lots of chops. He said, but when he started playing in the big band, he said he just dug this trench that the whole band fell into.
Wow.
And, you know, that was a great thing to hear him say.
Yeah.
And a great thing to observe, you know, up close.
Yeah.
I really got to see, you know, we got to see it a number of nights, and it was beautiful. You know, Louis was just fantastic. And he was the gentleman that everybody says he is. And, you know, he took, I went out with Lynn Buchanan and myself, and Louis took us out to dinner one night, you know, on the road, which was beautiful.
What memories there. Look, I'll just share a memory that I've got of big band drummer. The first really world-class drummer I think I saw was Warren Daly. And the Warren Daly and Ed Wilson big band. And of course, at the time they were sponsored by Benson and Hedges, and they were touring all around Australia. I can still remember to this day, and it's ironic that Marsha Hines, who we talked about earlier, was the singer with the band at that time. And it was I can still picture it, the Homestead Hotel in Zilmere, not just a northern suburb of Brisbane. And it was the days when, you know, their lead trumpet player was Norm Harris. And Greg Spence from Melbourne tells a great story of going for a lesson with Norm. And Norm used to practice leaning up against his bed because he fully expected when he was practicing his range that he'd pass out and fall over. Like it's a it's a different era. And I can remember, like, he didn't fall over on the Darley Wilson Big Band, but my God, I've never to this day heard a stronger double high A, you know, at the end of Mountain High Enough. Just that old school when men were men. But Warren Daly was a bit like what you were saying. Warren's this little guy, slight little figure. He's not like a big monster man, but did he control that band? You know, So, Gordon, what's your memories of Warren Daly, you being based in Sydney and Warren being a Sydney guy?
Well, yeah, when I was in high school, I had a school, one of my school teachers had a side hustle as a sound guy. And he and I, he used to take me along to gigs. You know, we do various things, including he took me up to Tamworth to do the Country Music Festival one year, the awards. But he used to do the sound at the Easter show. And for, I think, a couple of years in a row, we went there and he did sound for the Warren Daly Big Band. This is after Darley Wilson.
Yes.
And so it was just Warren's big band. But, you know, so I got to see him up close there. And, you know, that was like a fantastic lesson. Look, Warren, you know, I've had you know, I know Warren a little bit, and I'd love to, you know, I've actually thought about interviewing Warren like this, like trying to get, you know, just because I think there's not enough information about him, you know.
No.
But Warren has great chops and all of that stuff, but you know, the real beauty, and for me in Warren is the way he's able to just cradle the band, just control how the band plays. And you know, Ralph Powell's got some great stories about, you know, how specific Warren would be when they'd rehearse, about, you know, how wide he would sing the vibrato the way he wanted the horns to play it. And you know,
I'd encourage you, mate, because I you know, to this day I think Warren is the greatest drummer I've seen live, and the reason is exactly what you were saying, because the feel. But a magic moment happened many years later in the mid 1980s. My brother and I went to Los Angeles with dreams of being music superstars, and sort of came home 3 months later and thought Australia's pretty good. But when we came back over in Los Angeles at Dante's Jazz Club, Plas Johnson's quartet, and I can't remember the drummer, but everyone in that quartet was an absolute superstar, Mr. Pink Panther. When we come home, we stayed in Sydney for a bit of a week on the holiday and just casually walked into a restaurant at the Rocks, little restaurant that could barely fit 50 people. Errol Buddle, Cole Nolan on piano, Warren Daly on drums, and I think it was Dieter Voigt on bass. Mate, I have never, it was a whole other side of Warren Daly, and it's probably the most sensitive drumming I've ever heard. It was such a small place. No one used microphones, not even Errol.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there within 10 feet of these guys, and we both walked out and said, that's twice as good as anything we heard in Los Angeles. We really, it really was. The musicianship across that quartet would have just completely railroaded Plas Johnson. And Plas is a wonderful player, and he had experts with him, but there was a feel about it. And I'll never forget Warren's brushwork. It was so sensitive. The opposite of him driving that big band, you know, just grabbing that big band and saying, come with me.
Yeah, he's. I'll just tell you one quick thing.
Absolutely,
he's a heavyweight, Warren. And for actually, it was initially for my own interest, but also I use it as a teaching device. There's a Buddy Rich arrangement of a tune called Basically Blues.
Yes,
and Warren's band does that, and there's a good version of it on the when they appeared on the Burroughs collection.
I know the clip. Yeah.
So I've basically got that clip. I've got a clip of Buddy Rich playing it with his big band, and also Steve Gadd plays it with the Buddy Rich big band on. There's a record called Burning for Buddy, and there's a video of them doing the making of Burning for Buddy.
Okay.
So I've got these three versions of the same chart with three different great drummers, and I've got to tell you, Warren's is every bit as good as the others, you know, if not better.
Yeah.
Like it's really fantastic.
And I totally agree, mate. I'd encourage you to interview him, you know, because I just think you mention his name nowadays and no one knows. Let's just wrap it up now. Making a living as a professional musician, like in the creative thing, you're interesting because, you know, you've been with the best of the jazz players, you do contemporary stuff. You're sort of like the man for all seasons on drums. And do you feel that's what you like to be, that you want to be able to go in a TV band and back a name artist, or putting together a career in a small country like Australia, 26 million people? Has it been a fun, comfortable journey, or has it sort of been almost rattling the coin box to actually try and make a good living out of what you love doing?
Look, it's a good question and a very involved question. I mean, because I think for the first 10 or 15 years of my professional life, I would essentially get one big act that I was playing with, and they would do like if you're talking about making a living, that would be the majority of my income.
Yes.
And then you would supplement that with gigs around town, and Australia being what it is, I mean, if I suppose if I was, my level of drummer in say the States or whatever, you'd get on a tour and you'd have that tour and you wouldn't need to do anything else because the tour would go long enough, be paid well enough, and you'd be looked after, and so you get on a run like with a certain act. But here, if you're playing with a top name act or a medium name act or whatever, it's still like a weekend here, nothing for 2 weeks, 4 days there, nothing for a month, 2 weeks of solid with them, nothing for so in between you've got to keep all these other things up. So I mean, I've had the experience of being on the Opera House stage, getting a standing ovation, and like with the Sydney Symphony and some artists and whatever, and getting it like, and then the next day I'm on the back of a truck out in Windsor somewhere, playing in a paddock, like and it's it's that's just how it is, so it's you're constantly piecing it together. And I'd say more so now than ever, because even the bigger name acts are working it's very bitsy for everybody, whereas like even someone like James Morrison, I think, is working less now than say 15 years ago. He was he was
absolutely.
There was lots of corporate, and I think the corporate thing died in 2009, but people would spend money on corporate gigs, and those mainstream acts, like, or the sort of big name acts could make a good living going out and doing corporate gigs, and between doing live shows like public gigs as well. But you do well out of the corporate scene, whereas now. And also, I suppose, with the all these shows coming up, The Voice and Australian Idol, producing sort of minor stars, and people just want a name for their corporate show, so they just get someone from those, So the sort of older, like the Marshes and the Kate Sobranos and that we're getting less of that pie, if you will. But
for a lot of musicians, that they're just hungry to go and play in public. So they will largely go and have a squirt for $10 or $50 and a hot dog, where you would never get your lawyer, your doctor, your dentist or whatever to do that. Do you feel there's that pressure that it's hard to really get what you believe you're worth?
It's a good question. I mean, yes and no. One of the gigs I do now, one of the regular gigs I do now is I work for a company called Empire Touring, Mark Rostowski's Empire Touring, and he does a lot of gigs where he does these shows, and it's a backing band, like a house band, backing various singers from the 80s, like people like Ross Wilson, Wendy Matthews, Eurogliders, Shantuzis, Richard Clapton, Glenn Shorrock. That's a great gig, and we for the last few years, we've done the Big Red Bash up at Birdsville, and we do Monday Bash as well, which is the same promoter, and plus other gigs around. And so, and that's a situation where we're looked after well, you know, and I work with Glenn Shorrock and Kate Sobrano and people like that, and so you paid well for those gigs, but between them there's only so much work, so
Yes.
you have to fill in between, you know, with other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where it's the other stuff where you can't necessarily go, well, you know, I'm I'm $2,000 a night, you know, like
you can't quite set your price.
Because it's just, you know, it's just they need a drummer, they need anyone, you know. So and you either do it or you don't, you know.
Yes.
So it's it's a bit tricky, and I think that you decide whether
you're doing it or you're not. Yeah. So I suppose, and it's a question I always like to ask, what would be your best piece of advice to, if you think back to your younger self, but someone starting out now in today's industry who desperately wants to play drums for a living? Have you got any bit of advice that might be helpful to them, about just honest advice of what that might actually mean?
I've had young people. I had one young guy in particular who came, and I say to him, what do you want to do? And part of his answer was, he said, you know, I want to be known. I want to be famous.
Yeah.
You know, and my response was, like, I don't know how to tell you how to do that.
No.
But what I would suggest is get good at something. You know, get good at it first. You know, I think it's really about just following your passion. Like if you're into it, follow just the art for the art's sake, and the success will either follow or not. But you know, I don't, like, you know, there's all this emphasis on, you know, we spoke before about going to the con and me going to the con, and that putting me in the scene, you know, because that was the scene, you know.
Yes.
And now people get known for their, you know, like people got Instagram and YouTube and all that. So, and that's a world I don't partake in. I don't really.
No.
I don't begrudge anyone doing it, but it's not my thing. I just don't feel comfortable
doing
in that that thing. I mean, my kids sort of think I'm not very computer savvy. I'm pretty computer savvy, but I'm not
into the social media thing.
Social media savvy, But you know, so that's a means to an end. That's not an end in itself. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that, you know, if you've got 2,000 or, you know, 200,000 followers or whatever, you've made it. But, you know, whether that translates into making a living or not, I don't know. I mean, for me, you know, I do recordings here, and, you know, we did our Bye Bye Blackbird, and that was fun. But I imagine it would have been 10 times as much fun if we'd been in the room together,
100%.
playing together, you know. And I do a lot of recordings here, where and I appreciate the work and so on. I had an interesting experience during lockdown when my friend Bill Risby sent me a track to play, a ballad, and I played on it, and he sent it back and he went, yeah, he said, sounds all right. He said, let's wait till we can get together, and so we did, and we got together, and when he got Leon Gare playing bass, and we played it together as a trio, and the difference is chalk and cheese. Like, it's, you know, like, it's like the difference when we're playing together.
Yes.
And you can react, and you can suggest things, and you can go, well, let's push here, and let's you know, do whatever. Let's come down dynamically. Yes. All that, it makes it for an interesting track rather than a sort of generic standard thing where I'm playing to a preconceived, you know, guide track.
But I think your advice is the best that I could give too, is, look, if it's your absolute passion, I always remember Wynton Marsalis's dad saying to him, there's a great thing, I think it's on YouTube, where Wynton recalls telling his father that he wanted to be a professional jazz musician. And of course, Wynton's dad was a professional jazz musician, earning, you know, $5 a day and just really struggling to think. And Ellis Marsalis said to Wynton, he said, well, make sure you've got absolutely nothing to fall back on. Isn't that, if you want to be a jazz musician, no bridge, burn every bridge, and you can't. And Wynton said at the time he didn't really understand it, but he does now. He fully understands what his father was saying.
Yeah.
We're going to watch one final track, and if I had to use a word to sum up your playing, I think it's energy. And I don't mean just bash, bash, bash energy, but there's an energy in your playing that to me is undeniable. And there's a great track here again from the Idol series, Ricky Lee singing We Can Work It Out. And your friend Ralph's in the horn section. Ralph, as always, is just cracking them out like you wouldn't believe. This band is fantastic. The energy of the drums is there. I think it's a positive way to go out. But before we do, if people want to connect with you, you said you're not a social media person. If someone who's watched this and said, geez, I really like Gordon's approach to it, I'd like to get a lesson off Gordon, I'd like to, what is the best way for someone to actually get in touch with you?
Probably just email me. It's Gordo, Gordo, at GordonRittmeister.com, name.com.
Okay, we'll put that up. I'll put that on the screen, and I'll also put it at the end. We also got the chance to collaborate on, I remember saying to you, what would you like to collaborate? And you said Bye Bye Blackbird. And I thought, I love that song. In fact, that was one of the tunes that I got to hear Errol Buddle and Warren Daly play that night at that restaurant. The minute you said that, I thought, I'm going on tenor, and if I can give you the ultimate compliment, even though we had a piece this together, I'm in Queensland, you're in New South Wales, I think the end result has come out really good. There's a real good feel to this, and there's energy in your playing, but it's beautiful, subtle brushwork. And for just saxophone and a snare and a hi-hat, I think there's a wonderful feeling in this track. And it was a real honor to have you play drums. And I love when you said Bye Bye Blackbird. It just connected with me. I just had an image of Errol and Warren that night just playing, and I fantastic. All right, mate, is there anything else you'd like to, we'll watch We Can Work It Out, then we'll go out with Bye Bye Blackbird. Is there anything you would like to tell the listeners, or any projects that's coming up, or just anything at all that you'd like to close out with?
Oh, no, I mean, I'll just say thanks for having me. It's been really a real pleasure, and I appreciate your interest. And I'm coming up to Christmas Carol season. I'm doing about 6 different Christmas Carol gigs this year, which is pretty good for a half Jewish boy, I reckon.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time, mate. And there's some wonderful stories and memories. And as I said, in your career, you've had the chance to play with quite literally the best of the best in a number of fields. And I think you've consistently done that with the energy in your playing that is appropriate for the task at hand. And not too many people, even amongst the professionals, I think can pull it off in the way that you do. It's a credit to you.
Well, thank you. Thanks, mate.
Okay, bye for now.
Thank you. Cheers.
Life is very short, and there's no time for fussing and fighting. So I'll ask you once again, should I see it my way? Do I have to keep on talking till I can't go on? Why you see it your way? There's a risk of knowing that love may soon be gone. We can work it out. We can work it out. Think of what I'm saying. We can work it out. And still you think that it's alright. Think of what I'm saying. You can get it wrong and still you think that it's alright. We can work it out. We can work it out. Life is very short, and there's
what a fantastic opportunity it has been to get the inside story from one of the finest drummers that Australia has ever produced. As always across the podcast series, I invited Gordon to do a collaboration with me where the host and guest can share some music making beyond just a great conversation. We get to see and hear a very different side of Gordon's drumming here. I'm playing the tenor saxophone and Gordon's got his snare drum, hi-hats and brushes. We're playing an old jazz standard written in 1926, Bye Bye Blackbird. I hope you enjoy it.